Let me welcome you all to this session. We are marking 1 year since the launch of the Paris Dialogue. Je voudrais remercier Rémi.
I would like to thank Rémi Rieu with the French Development Agency, UNESCO, OECD, for allowing us to gather last year in order to discuss how we can bring together all funding sources when faced with a challenging task of helping developing countries in coming out of poverty, as well as meeting the challenge of climate change. How can we make sure that we are going to mobilize every possible funding avenue and do it together? We are in a momentum where we're trying to come together, regardless of whether we come from the west and the east or the south and the north. We have brought together the Bank of the Council of Europe as well as the International Energy Agency. I would also like to thank everyone. Thank you, everyone, for being here with us. So here is what I suggest. We are going to start this session. The session is called the Paris Dialogue 1 year on. What we're going to do is to take stock of what has happened, what are the main topics.
The institutions that launched the Paris Dialogue and others around the table, what are the priorities that you have set for yourselves to contribute to igniting all the engines? And number two, once we do that, is what kind of common platform could we bring to the next big international deadline, which is the financing for development that my own country, Spain, will host in Seville next year. This milestone that would probably be well served if we all were capable of bringing a set of common messages to the table. So, without further ado, let me pass the floor to Rémi. Merci, Rémi. Tu as la parole.
Merci beaucoup, Arantxa.
Thank you very much, Arantxa. Good afternoon, everyone. I am in awe at the audience. And I'm very happy to start saying a few words about where we're standing at with our dialogue. And then I will say a few words about how to finance sustainable development. This is the topic that we chose as a main discussion for 2025 in Seville. Last year, we already had a similar meeting. The 7 organizations which have an international mandate that you listed, Arantxa, were all there. I would also like to thank the Ministry of Europe and Foreign Affairs, as well as the Paris City with Arnaud. Both have been supporting this initiative and the work that we've been doing. And thank you very much to all the Parisian people who are here. After all, the goal of this event is to bring together all stakeholders who are involved in such global issues in Paris. Last year, what we did was to agree on principles, on what we wanted to do together, and what we wanted to include in the final document. Now, today, maybe tomorrow, let's take some time to send out a press release. What we want to do, and what I would like to suggest, is that we come up with common wording in terms of work program. I'm sure you received the draft document, but we are going to amend it by tomorrow, and we're going to share it with the wider public. Again, I would like to focus that this is a draft work program. We have brought together the different initiatives, everything that has been done over the past year, and what we want to turn into a reality by next year, by 2025. feel free to include things that you would like to include. So we also agreed on a logo. It's something that is not a shiny bling logo, but I think we can all agree on the need to have a common image. We decided that we were going to work on number one, science and the science-innovation-entrepreneurship nexus. Number two, culture for sustainable development, as well as ways to fund sustainable development and its dimensions. Here in Paris, there is a number of stakeholders who are up to the task to give a global reach to this Paris dialogue. So we could focus on science, education, and sustainable development, if that's something that you can agree on. Moreover, given the geopolitical situation, I believe that speaking out with a common voice in the global arena is something that matters more than ever. Now, of course, this requires some funding, and that brings me back to the reason why we are here together today. Maybe we can talk about a position message so that the Paris dialogue speaks, as I said, in one voice, and maybe we could agree on a number of themes. But I think we need to be able to agree before 2025. We have very little time left. We know that all those funding avenues are going to be under a lot of pressure by 2025. We know that some of you might have been attending COP16 in Cadiz on biodiversity. There has been progress made, but the funding aspect has been postponed to 2025. Now, I'm going to leave in an hour to leave for Baku. Some of you might meet me there for the climate conference. I certainly hope that we are going to make progress on Article 6 and carbon markets. We are nearly there, and I certainly hope that we are going to make final progress. Maybe we'll be able to make progress on the principles underpinning the climate finance. I don't know if we'll be able to put figures on paper, but at least agree on principles. This is something that might be, again, postponed to 2025, especially given the high level of the high pressure from an emotional and political viewpoint that we are going to be under. Moreover, we are going to start tackling biodiversity, climate, and development and sustainable development financing. This is something that we will have to tackle in a comprehensive way, both in the private and public aspects. This is something that we will need to agree on between Seville and Belém. I don't think we are all yet taking stock of the huge amount of pressure that we will be under. So we need to come up with concrete solutions. We need to make progress where we can. And the Paris dialogue can help. So we have three topics at hand, something that has to do with architecture. The international funding architecture is too fragmented. We need to come up with a way to make it up to the task. Sandrine, thankfully, multilateral banks are making progress together. The World Bank has played a key role, as well as the Inter-American Development Bank, but this is too small scale, and we need to expand this effort. This is something that we tried to do as early as last year with an effort to bring together all development banks. making sure that investment and private money will be fully mobilized. That was number one. Number two, we need to have a clear reference framework. There's a large array of climate finance, plus a wide array of reference frameworks that coexist. And they sometimes overlap or sometimes clash with one another. And they do not offer the necessary framework and accountability. So we have shared a suggestion for you. This is an AFD document that is based on using climate funding and investment as a way to channel money from donor countries to benefiting countries in order to fund what is not fundable as I speak. So I'm very much looking forward to hearing what you have to say as a way to send a suggestion to the UN by the end of the year. If this effort is as inclusive as it should be, if the framework is as far-reaching as we should, maybe we could expand our ambitions. Maybe we would be able to convince all of our countries to dedicate more resources to such an effort. Budget efforts in Europe needs to be up to the task. President Macron published an op-ed recently about the contribution of G20 countries. How to make the best use of that money if the architecture was more effective. So a lot has been done over the past 10 years, Addis Ababa, 2015. A lot of things have been achieved, and maybe time has come to put everything on the paper, to crystallize, to bring everything together. And I think we are very willing to help achieve that result. The Common Finance Initiative that I was mentioning will convene in Cape Town between the 26th and 28th of February 2025. It will be the first time everyone meets at the same time in the same place as the G20 leaders, as well as G20 countries' bank governors. This is something that we had done back in 2015. This is something that came as a result of a strong initiative from finance ministers. Maybe we need to take stock of the tools, like the existing tools. Maybe we need to bring together finance ministers as a way to overcome a number of constraints and leverage initiatives. So you are all invited in South Africa. I think they are the chair of G20. There is a transition that has been engaged in South Africa. There's a very interesting dialogue going on in Africa, and I think it would be great if we could conjure up all this. And we believe that the Paris dialogue needs to act as a spearheader. Thank you very much. Thank you so much, Remy.
Stefania Giannini, Deputy Director General for Assistant Director General for Education at UNESCO. Stefania.
Thank you so much, Arantxa. Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon, Remy. Je suis très heureuse de voir les progrès.
I am so happy to see the exceptional advances since last year with the logo that we agreed on and 3 main avenues for progress. UNESCO is very happy to contribute to the success of those 3 themes and making sure that we are are more effective in bringing about sustainable development.
And try to see how it's so timely to have this discussion in Paris. We're just coming from an important global event in Fortaleza under the auspices of the G20, Brazilian presidency, where the Director General Audrey Azoulay of UNESCO and President Lula made the case for investment better and more for education. Calling for more and better investment for education is not new for sure. We know that since the launch of the 2030 Agenda, the Incheon Declaration set benchmarks at least 4.67 of GDP and 15 to 20 of total public expenditure is still 41% of countries, unfortunately, didn't meet either of these two benchmark established. And what is new now, and that's where we have to build together, and why it's so important to have this discussion today, is the broader context. It's the broader context which informs UNESCO's approach for advocating for financing education and culture for sustainable development by making the economic and political case for investment. And this is what the Fortaleza Declaration, where 50 ministers of education and finance adopted this statement and commitment, brought up on top of the political agenda. And the declaration calls for increasing the volume, equity, and efficiency of investment in education, building on the call to action on educational investment that the Secretary General Guterres launched, maybe you remember, 2 years ago in New York, alongside the UNGA Week during the Transforming Education Summit. While our main strategy as international community remains the same, to develop sustainable funding approaches for education, the good news is that now, for the first time since 2015, this conversation doesn't happen only within education ministers, between ministers of education and their constituencies, but it's now designed and proposed as part of a broader strategy for sustainable funding for development, and where the three line of actions come to. This strategy has also included increased advocacy for investment in culture, and this year, for the very first time, we've seen that culture is recognized as an important component of the Pact for the Future. So now, we are taking to the 4th International Financing for Development Conference in Seville, in your country, Arantxa, 3 points. Number one, the case for investment in education and culture requires a whole-of-government approach. That means moving from competing priorities to complementary priorities. It's easy to demonstrate, for instance, that if we want to be serious in terms of taking climate action, we cannot exclude the education component. It's easy to showcase with evidence and data that we want to be serious to establish a peace and security society, peaceful society, and peace and security as a goal of the Pact for the Future. We cannot exclude education and global citizenship education and critical thinking education as an important component. So, all government approach means to bring this complementarity within decision-making processes about the budget. Number two, the case for investment in education is now based on concrete data. Thanks to an unprecedented cooperation, let me say, at least since I joined UNESCO almost 7 years ago, between OECD, UNESCO, the World Bank, the Global Partnership for Education, more recently Commonwealth of Learning, we now are able together to assess and evaluate both the impact of price of inaction and the benefits and long-term return of investment in education. Let me mention a recent publication, OECD, UNESCO, Commonwealth, on the price of inaction, which estimates, we presented, by the way, at IFD recently here in Paris, that we are losing some 3.3 trillion per year for children without basic skills. in the coming 10 years, from now to 2030 and beyond, which is the equivalent to the annual GDP of France or the UK. And this means building a common narrative also. Having this data, better data for better policy, means to have a common narrative within the international community. And it's important to explain why it is crucial to include education and culture, for instance, in the new World Bank strategy for job creation in Africa. President Banga launched this new strategy a few days ago, as you are all aware, in Washington, and this must include an education component, because without unskilled or upskilled youth in the continent, it will be absolutely impossible to be an ecosystem for innovation and economic growth. The third point is the case for investment in education, including concrete measures and proposals to address ongoing challenges in terms of domestic and international financing. That means to bring to Seville concrete case studies, for instance, debt swap, in international cooperation. A good example is France and Cote d'Ivoire recently. Another good example is GPE and working in Sierra Leone on this mechanism. And this can bring new additional resources without increasing necessarily the amount of investment. So culture as well is very much an important component. We are proposing also concrete measures for financing culture in different way, and this is about digital environment and copyright. This is about the role of creative economies, and this is about, of course, preservation, safeguarding, and promotion of cultural heritage. So this brings me to the last important point, which is one of the first big changes I mentioned at the beginning. Without the ministers of finance fully on board in this conversation, we are not getting to the point that also the Dialogue de Paris wish to finalize. And that's why it's important that this idea of bringing together ministers of finance in a coalition which should advocate for these important priorities, education, culture, but I wish to add science in the list, is one of the initiatives that within the international community we are seriously taking in the last few months. So the last message is really inviting all of you to join us in this intersectoral approach, and we really see Paris as an international hub with a unique power and opportunity to bring to Seville next year this consolidated approach to financing development. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Stefania. This is a call for finance ministers to become our best friends. And it's true that they are not really, these days, our best friends. Let me now turn to Mary-Beth Gottman, Deputy Secretary General, OECD. Mary-Beth, floor to you.
Thank you so much. I'm going to be brief just in the interest of time, and apologies to the translators for speaking quickly. So what we're focusing on at the OECD is data. We believe in the hard data. We know we need the hard data to get the finance ministers on board and to get others on board. So I'm going to give you three sort of buckets where we are really drilling down on some data. One is through TOSTIP, which everyone knows you have to have a good acronym for something to land. So this is the Total Support for Sustainable Development Framework. We need more countries to join. Please tell countries to give some data and contribute to this, because unless we get the data, we're not going to have it as robust as it needs to be, as Remy already mentioned. So TOSD, that's what you need to. This is an effort to effectively measure and monitor the SDG-related investments beyond official development assistance by looking at the private resources that are mobilized through official means, the official guarantees, the loan guarantees, the credit lines, the concessional loans. All of that is the data we are trying to capture so that we can quantify it and see what really exists. So TOSTI is giving us that framework to create a more complete picture of the development finance flows by helping to capture how official support contributes to mobilizing the resources for the SDGs. So I mentioned ODA. Everyone is aware that the Development Assistance Committee sits at the OECD, and we focus a lot of our time and attention on the data around ODA. The pie is shrinking, the slices are getting smaller, and there's simply not enough to go around. We all know that we need to do more. So we are looking at how we can use ODA to leverage more change for biodiversity, for sustainable development, for climate action. Looking to look at some of the tools like the guarantees or the blended finance that we keep hearing about to help unlock more capital. So we're looking at the finance and the investment value chains to really take an approach to support the mobilization. Looking upstream on how we can strengthen the enabling environment and looking downstream to work on facilitating the financial flows. We're really digging on this. We're also exploring how we can look at blended finance models to support the scaling of some of this innovative financial instruments that we all keep hearing about but haven't yet materialized. We're trying to look at this through the lens of some of the green, the social, sustainability-linked bonds that are out there to really come up with what's working, what's not, where are the gaps, how do we unlock some of that financing. Point 3, we're looking at the global collaborations and initiatives. So we're going along the route with the backing of the G7 and the African leaders. We have launched what we're calling the Africa Virtual Investment Platform in conjunction with the African Union to help improve their data and their policies that will contribute to all of these risk ratings that we see and mobilize greater investment overall. So this has just been launched. We're really excited about what that can contribute. Coming out of the Peace Forum last year, there was the announcement by President Macron around the Coalition Coal Transition Accelerator. So we're working really hard on this one to help develop the guidance for private financial institutions to help finance a just transition away from coal. So this is really finally starting to make some progress. Leading up to Seville, a lot of data is going to be needed. We are doing our utmost to get that data out as quickly as we can so that it's feeding into the negotiations and not coming too late. So along those lines, we have provided fact sheets on all of the 7 action areas of the Addis agenda. These are now already up and available on the FFD4 website. All of these are affirming that we need the data-driven assessments based on the clear indicators that we all know are essential for the constructive dialogue that needs to happen around these negotiations, especially given the craziness in the geopolitics of today. The last point I'll say, we have a report coming out in February that is framing all of these efforts in a way that's going to contribute, we think, to the negotiations. This is our 2025 Global Outlook on Financing for Sustainable Development. This focuses on setting the stage for Seville, and I'm hopeful that we will be in a position to collectively identify some shared and complementary messages for our FFD negotiators coming out of some of the data in this report, along with potentially some concrete actions that each of our institutions could potentially support regarding the implementation of the Seville Agreement. The Global Outlook is going to highlight the risks associated with the widening SDG financing gap while also proposing solutions for FFD4. No pressure on us to get this right, but we're looking forward to trying to contribute what we can to this discussion. So we're also looking to include some measures on how we can break some of these negative cycles that we keep seeing. The escalating cost of climate change, to accelerate the alignment of financing with the SDGs, and to identify new sources of financing, including some of these green and blue economies that we keep hearing about. So that is very quickly sort of what we're working on in a concrete way.
Thank you very much, Mary Beth. So here is the data that will help the negotiators in Seville start from the same point and presumably land at a common point. I'm going to go to Sandrine Gaudin, Vice Governor, Council of Europe Development Bank. Sandrine.
Merci beaucoup. Merci beaucoup pour cette initiative.
Thank you very much for taking this initiative. We're really very happy to contribute to the Paris Dialogue. We're a small development bank based in Paris, and we are the Bank of the Council of Europe. Our mandate is a social one. We're a small institution, one of the smallest of the development multilateral organizations. And so our goal and our way of working is to deal with subjects which probably slip out of the net of the bigger institutions. For example, we're working on fair transition for the time being, and that principle and how it can be applied, because we feel that we're probably too small to be considered as a bank that has any sort of impact on climate. We're too small. But as we do have social know-how and information concerning human capital, education, and culture, we feel that we can contribute so that we can add to this fair transition. That is the way in which the social consequences of all the transition policies can be cushioned. We know that sometimes these policies can have some negative reactions and effects, so they need to be cushioned and protected. We are working on this. We're making it as rational as possible. And we've also developed social financing. This is part of sustainable financing. We have social bonds that are issued, and we have quite a lot of know-how in that area as well that we would like to share. And this is obviously part in the discussions that are held abroad and also in Paris. These are our two main themes, the two main areas in which we work. And we are delighted to be here and to be able to contribute usefully to the Paris Dialogue on these different subjects, and also to make Paris the central focal point for these issues. We think they're very important. Now, we also work in coordinating with multilateral development banks. We are chairing next year, for example, the International Development Banks Consortium. So it'll be interesting for us also to establish a link between banks and all the different groups that work in development, national agencies, for example. And obviously, we'd be delighted to contribute and to help for the Seville summit. We can also add our own contributions, but also work as a coordinator with the multilateral development banks. We talk about that all the time. Since the war in Ukraine, this coordination has actually really taken on a different form. It really means something. It's become much more concrete. We're sharing much more. There's much more being worked on for mutual reliance. And so it's become more concrete. And I think that this experience next year will be really useful for all of us. And it'll also be made available to the Paris Dialogue. We also share the goals of the work program for the Paris Dialogue, and we will try to contribute as well. In Baku, for example, we will be presenting the work that we've carried out on fair transition, but we will also be able to share this in other fora whenever required. And so this work program will obviously be added to with our own contributions over time. Thank you very much for taking this initiative, and it really has made the 11th of November a more cheerful day, but not only that, it's important for it to go beyond, not only on the 11th of November, but also much more into the future. Thank you. Let me give the floor to Philippe Varin, who's the president of the International Chamber of Commerce.
So I'm delighted to join you today in my capacity of chair of International Chamber of Commerce. We are the global voice of business with 94 national committees, and through the chambers we have 45 million businesses. And we are here to enable trade. We are here to support the rule of law with the Court of Arbitration. We are here to support the climate transition, to digitalize trade everywhere. And we are, I think, a a partner of choice for WTO, which is not an easy ride for the time being. So we are clearly entering into a period of heightened uncertainty of the multilateral system, with question marks hanging over the future and the future direction of international cooperation on a range of vital areas for the business community: trade, taxation, climate, to name just three. So this uncertainty, from my perspective, underscores the potential values of this process of the Paris Dialogue, because bringing together organizations not only with a shared location, but ones with a shared understanding of the value of effective international cooperation, and moreover a wealth of complementary expertise and networks. So in this context, I was delighted to see the positive discussions across the various working groups who take place at the last meeting in September. And I'd like to particularly thank you to the AFD and OECD for driving this work forward. But I'd like to take the opportunity today to set out a small challenge. Specifically, can we move from a more positive interinstitutional discussions to a program of work capable of catalyzing action in the real world? Here, I see a particular need and opportunity in the space of sustainable finance, which is the third pillar, which was mentioned by Rémi at the beginning. In other words, can we do together, and potentially bringing other partners, what can we do to speed the alignment of the financial system with the global stability goals, not least the Paris Climate Agreement? I'd like to suggest two potential ideas in this end. The first is on trade finance. It's a market which operates on the basis of market standards, which we have developed and administered here by ICC, but which today severely lags other asset classes in embedding sustainability consideration into finance decisions. In the last few weeks, we have issued a new high-level principles for green trade finance and a detailed methodology to allow banks to grade the sustainability according to some SDGs and to the sustainability profile of individual trade transactions. So from the seller to the buyer with a chain of transportation, upstream of the seller, downstream from the buyer, the full supply chain. This follows almost 3 years of detailed consultations with banks. We have worked with 9 global banks and corporates as well, over 70 countries. We now work, and we need to work with partners to drive the uptake of these new standards across the markets, and critically, to ensure that companies making a positive contribution to sustainable development benefit from preferential rates from trade finance facilities. Otherwise, all this is worth nothing. This rollout will require a multi-pronged effort encompassing appropriate public incentives and extensive capability building in developing markets. We would be keen to explore how we might utilize this forum to take forward with partners, banks, that effort with relevant institutions, and this is it for the first idea. Now, second idea. More broadly, we are cognizant that there is a growing body of evidence that existing macro-prudential rules, such as Basel III or Solvency II, act as an inadvertent barriers to the supply of climate finance to developing economies, especially to developing green projects in developing economies. And it's quite a paradox to increase the amount of reserves to prevent us from a potential financial crisis, which remains a potential, crisis, and at the same time, not allowing the green investments to be funded properly, because the crisis of climate is not an hypothetical one. And this has to change. And if you add to this the second point, which is that when the multilateral public banks fund $1 in the developing countries, you know that the leverage of private financing is ridiculous. It's 0.3. 1 goes to 1.3. It should be at least 1 for 1. And OECD has made this measurement, right? So this dynamic has been exacerbated by the impact of sovereign downgrades since the COVID-19 pandemic, because when the rating has been lowered in a number of countries, the corporate ratings of these countries have been lowering as well. And this has an impact on the regulatory capital weightings applied to investments in a swathe of developing markets. So we know this challenge has been raised in the context of the Finance in Common agenda, and it's certainly an issue that we will be pressing in Baku over the next 2 weeks. But my question is whether this forum could become a real catalyst for pioneering action. And, why don't we put a real, very concrete call to actions on these multilateral, prudential ratios and this ridiculous leverage that I mentioned. Bringing other vital partners such perhaps the Bank of France to test innovative approaches to align these regulatory incentives in the financial system would be a good thing to share with, to be shared with our global climate goals. And we could pilot some partnerships, and we are ready to try it to enable essential investment in clean energy and climate finance across the developing world. We would be very keen to discuss these two ideas with relevant Paris Dialogues partners in the coming weeks. But more broadly, I hope you will share my ambition in this very uncertain international context to have this process evolve into a platform capable of harnessing our collective assets, expertise to make a real difference in the real world. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Philippe. So I think you've given Sandrine, as the representative of MDBs around this table, a double task, which is, can we imagine a system of preferential rates for green trade finance? And can we have a look at the prudential regulations and the leverage ratios for financing climate in developing countries? Very interesting, and I think that could be the object of a bit of a collective work. Let me ask now Mary Burst-Warlick, Deputy Executive Director, International Energy Agency, to take the floor. Mary.
Well, thank you very much for the opportunity to join this discussion today. I think, as many of you know, the IEA has been looking deeply at the issue of the financing for increasing investment in clean energy transitions in emerging and developing economies for some time already. At least since 2021, we did as I recall, our first sort of global report on the subject, and subsequently we've done a number of regional reports on it, including on the need for and the challenges for financing the energy transition in sub-Saharan Africa, for example. Really like to thank France and AFD for your leadership on the agreement last year on the Paris Dialogue Roadmap, and under the roadmap, as you know, the IEA has been asked to work specifically on the challenges related to lowering the cost of capital. So we issued, and I believe it was in 2022, our first report, first cost of capital observatory, taking a sort of detailed look at the varying cost of capital challenges in countries around the world. And then earlier this year, in February 2024, we issued an updated report with specific recommendations. And I'll also add, we've been working very closely with the G20 presidencies on this wide and important topic, and working with Brazil this year. They recognized and saw as a priority the urgent need for boosting clean energy investment in emerging and developing economies to support transitions, and clearly meeting the growing energy demand while achieving access, climate, and other development goals, according to our analysis, is going to require more than six-fold increase in clean energy investment in developing economies over the next decade. And I should just point out that while global clean energy investments are on track to reach nearly $2 trillion in 2024, out of a total of about $3 trillion across the energy sector, only 15% of that funding is going to emerging and developing economies other than China. So there is a huge heavy lift lift that's required to really help to facilitate and accelerate the flow of capital to those countries. So coming back to Brazil, the IEA was invited by Brazil to work on a G20 clean energy investment roadmap for developing economies. And actually, this is going to be launched just a few days from now in the Brazilian pavilion on 13th of November at COP29. So I really encourage all of you who may be interested to take a look at that. But this is a document that looks more deeply at the key actions that need to be taken by governments, by development partners, by industry, philanthropies, and other stakeholders over the next decade, looking deeply too at the specific policies that need to be developed, enhancing developing countries to improve their energy policies and planning, among other things, seeking out better data to drive down risk perceptions and lower financing costs, and looking closely at which kinds of projects require public funding and additional concessional funding, and which may require less. But just to focus on a few key facts, cost of capital is 2 to 3 times higher in emerging and developing economies, and this is clearly holding back clean energy investments. Our analysis with the IFC input has shown that acceleration of clean energy investment in developing economies outside China will require a tripling of concessional funding and targeted de-risking solutions to de-risk investments, lower the cost of capital, increase private capital mobilization, and create a robust pipeline of bankable clean energy projects. So the recommendations already mentioned for bringing development banks together to help mobilize this concessional funding, bringing ministers of finance together, obviously really important as well. So once again, I just direct you to the report that's coming back in a few days. Just to add a couple of final points, we estimate that achieving SDG 7.1, so universal access to clean cooking and electricity, would require global annual investments of $55 billion to 2030, of which $10 billion will be required for clean cooking. And this analysis also finds that 2/3 of this spending needs to occur in Africa. So just to underscore that the challenges related to clean cooking have been a particular focus of the IEA's work this year. As many of you know, we hosted a summit on this topic early this year. There's a couple of follow-up events taking place at COP29 in Baku, and of course more focused attention is required. And then I'll just mention as well, key recommendation from this roadmap that's soon to be issued will be strengthening data transparency of investment projects, and of course the cost of capital and all that's required there. Just to close by saying we really look forward to working with Brazil's COP30 presidency, but also the G20 South African presidency. I've just returned days ago from some meetings in South Africa, and this is clearly going to be a very high priority for them. And so we're very keen to work with them and to help continue to make progress on this really important set of issues. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Let me open the floor now to other participants. And let me turn to Cécile Goubet. Cécile.
Thank you very much, Arantxa. I don't know if we have to speak French or English, or maybe, okay, so let's go for French. Bonjour à tous, merci beaucoup de me donner la parole.
Well, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for giving me the floor regarding the Finance Institute. As you know, we are very much looking to a solution how to help various players to mobilize private investment in Europe and worldwide. We started work in 2023 on the various ways and means to accelerate private financing for the energy transition in emerging economies. And I can only agree with my colleagues round the table about data availability. This is something we've been discussing for more than a year, especially the opening of the GEMS database on everything to do with risk assessment and de-risking for private financial financial players. And I believe that what Philippe Varin just said about the leverage ratio between public and private finance is a far cry from where it should be. But the real thing is, how can public finance bring about a better leverage of private financing? I mean, you have the prudential aspects that were pointed out, but other than that, there's this big issue of de-risking of investment. And so what is it we can do by way of guarantees? I mean, it makes a big difference. And what we're doing at our institute, and this is like breaking news, but we're working with other partners to put together a database organized by theme and by type of funds, so that players can find the information more readily. So that goes in line with this concept of availability and transparency of information. And we're more than happy to talk with all players about this to make progress on that tool, which we hope will facilitate, make life easier for private players as well. Right, well, thank you so very much, Cécile. I'll give the floor to Macanjar from the city of Paris. Well, thank you. My name is Arnaud Gassia. I am the international deputy of the mayor of Paris, and a few words about her objectives for the SDGs, but also her own work in addressing climate change. The tragedy in Spain, Valencia, have shown us we really have to act urgently. What it is that the city of Paris is doing and how we can work with various partners. So Paris has been, of course, implementing public policies. The mayor wants she has 26 plans already on the table: climate, biodiversity, resilience, health. And the big innovation is the climate plan, that is bioclimate urban planning project, and that provides restrictions in terms of urban development in the capital, in Paris. So I give you a few specific examples. If you live in Paris, you've seen changes in mobility schemes. We've been trying to restrict high carbon mobilities and promoting low carbon mobilities, cycle lanes. On buildings, we've been promoting insulation. We have new projects where there's a local urban planning bioclimate plan. So that should provide for new solutions. There's the fossil fuel plan, where we're trying to see how we can cut down on that. Water supply management, how we can save on the water. And of course, sustainable food. We are working on public procurement to promote what we called reasoned and organic agriculture. Now, I hope some of you were able to attend the Olympics and the Paralympics. There was a sporting event, of course, but the mayor wanted this to be more than that. And that event served to accelerate Paris's transition towards SDGs. You may remember about the cycle lanes, and there were a number of lanes that were set up ahead of the Olympics, and this is the sort of thing we'd like to continue. And you've seen this right at the foot of the Eiffel Tower. You'll see that the bridge connecting the Eiffel Tower to this venue, this bridge now is just for pedestrians. And so that's a major development. And this, of course, we work this hand in hand with the Paris Préfet, representing central government. Being able to swim in the River Seine, I mean, that's something. I mean, many of you were able to see for themselves. Now the water is crystal clear. And we've been working on that. It's not just pollution. We also are working on temperature. We've had heights of like 50 degrees Celsius in Paris, and So Parisians should be able to, take a dive in the river to cool off, and that's why we've done that. And Arena, this is a major venue, not just for sporting events, but that was designed with, environmentally designed as well. And in fact, we're going to set up an observatory of urban sustainable development. That would be a place where best practices should be shared. And then in Paris, we've been working with partners on, this business of green finance. We want cities to be able to have access to funds to finance their environmental transition. And
we have been sharing objectives with the mayor of Rio on SDGs, and we have been able to be supported by a number of banks with the partnership of Alain. There's also a guarantee fund for green cities that may be created, may be set up by a number of stakeholders, including with the Latin American Caribbean Development Bank. I think this is something that you already mentioned. And there's also a level of advocacy with GECOM in order to encourage a number of establishments to dedicate money to urban development. Our mayor has been advocating for this to be embraced at a local level in order to be able to replicate positive results in an efficient way. Valencia was a disaster, as I said, and it's a constant reminder of the emergency that we are faced with. There's also a call for a network of cities for renewed multilateralism, making sure that cities can advance their needs, to make sure that their needs are fully taken into account in the same way as states. The G20 will be convening soon, and I'm positive that such topics will be discussed by mayors as well as by heads of states. So, very quickly, interventions from...
I'm Piera Tortora. I'm the head of the Paris Pact for People and the Planet Secretariat. So, very briefly, you know that the 4P was launched last year with the aim to reform or accelerate efforts to reform the international financial architecture. We're now 68 countries at the 4P, so that's fantastic. And also we have a number of operational coalitions. So these are really concrete opportunities for countries to work together in a very flexible way on the topics that interest them the most. So Rémi Rieu just recalled that there's been an op-ed signed by President Macron, but also Miyamoto and President Ruto over the weekend to join actually the 4P coalition on global solidarity levies. So this is a way to find innovative financing for the ecological and energy transition. We also, you probably also are aware, and today we had the minister from Colombia who spoke about it. We have the 4P coalition on the global expert review on debt, climate, and nature, which is looking at the interlinkages between debt and also debt burdens, climate issues, and nature issues. And a report will be issued in April. So we really look forward to engaging with you for the uptake of the recommendations of this report that is looking at debt for nature swaps and other innovative mechanisms. We're working on the cost of capital, and I really like the point that you mentioned, Philippe, because actually the 4P prepared a paper on these issues around prudential regulations and how they're hampering investments in developing countries. We presented at the G20 in Brazil, and actually we're very pleased that the G20 outcome document of the Clima Task Force took up some of our recommendations, showing also the capacity of the 4P to translate some of the technical work into policy influence, let's say. And we're also launching an expert group to move forward this prudential regulations work, as well as a roadmap for improving the accuracy and transparency of credit ratings. I will just mention as a last point that the 4P, so this community of 68 countries, we've been working together on a contribution for the FFD4, which contains some transformational ideas for to bring to Seville, and we really look forward to working closely with all of you to move them forward. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Frédéric.
Merci beaucoup, Frédéric Worms.
Thank you very much, Frédéric Worms. I'm the head of the École Nationale Supérieure. So very, very briefly, I would like to go back to objective 1 and 3, aka science. Science is the one that seemingly needs most time against an accelerating emergency. We have 2 summits that I would like to mention, one that is real and one that is possible. I would like to thank AFD as well as the International Chamber of Commerce, which we met in the past. We are talking about the physics of transition and the funding of disruptive technologies. There is an institution called Paris Santé Campus, a Paris Health Campus, and based on that same model, we want to make sure that we are going to be able to mobilize society, students, teachers, as a way to advance disruptive sciences and technologies. And I believe that we can help organizing a forum on that aspect next year. We have a number of scientists, including Sartori here, who is one of the major quantum science researchers in France and in Europe. They are all part in accelerating the transition to anchoring science with funding. There will be another meeting next year, a summit on artificial intelligence next year that has been organized under the aegis of the Élysée of the French presidency. This is something that has been steered by Anne Moreau, who's the head of the National Superior Science. She was the one who created and spearheaded the foundation on AI and social justice. The February summit will bring a large number of stakeholders, and that on the margin of that forum, there will be an event dedicated to AI and society and societal issues. We believe that it's possible to bring together the economy, funding, AI, and social justice. We believe that AI can be a tool at the service of research and bridging basic research and applied research. We have also been working with British and American universities on AI and democracy. We believe that this is a third angle on which we can work on those aspects. We need to make sure that social sciences, society, population need to be on board when we start dedicated some thinking about social justice and AI. So what I would like to suggest is that we organize an event in 2025 on how to fund disruptive sciences. Events have taken place in the past between the International Chamber of Commerce, with the FD, between researchers and scientists, but we need to continue doing the exact same thing. We need to advance this field. Thank you so much. And finally, Bruno. I'm going to be very brief. I know that we are reaching the end of this session. I would like to say 2 things. I would like to start by thanking Rémi Rioux and everyone who organized this meeting, including at the Ministry of European and Foreign Affairs. Everyone has said the same thing. Everyone has shared the same message. The 2030 agenda is getting closer to its deadline. We are faced with a number of transformations. There was the Future Forum in September at the UN General Assembly, and there has been a number of very positive deliverables that I would urge you to reread. It's something that was adopted unanimously, thanks to, among others, the help of France. We want to make sure that UN system is more inclusive and takes on board a new number of challenges. This is something that was a major advancement ever since 2021. Next year, I would like to remind you that there will be the 4th International Conference on Financing for Development, as well as the end of the UN transformation process. So we can see that the UN has brought along a number of solutions. France has ratified a number of tools, and we do believe, I think we need to keep on banking on multilateralism. I'm very happy happy to see that this conversation took place. I'm very happy to see that there's a lot of solutions out there, a lot of ideas out there that are brought on board when it comes to the very important challenges that we're faced with. Now, the second thing that I wanted to say is Paris' role, Paris as a city. I think it's very important to remind that France has a very rich ecosystem. A lot of agencies have been putting a lot of work, including people that are less known, including the UNEP Bureau based in Paris. UNESCO is one of them. The United Nations University, which is located here. This is a very rich, very valuable ecosystems that need to be mobilized. This is something that is indispensable. We need to be able to work together. There's a number of interconnected issues. AI, that will be the topic at the heart of an event next year. AI, which is both a challenge but also a source of solutions in order to better understand the issues. There would be so AI, oceans, nature. There will be an ocean event next year in Marseille. Health is also one of the aspects in which AI has a role to play. There will be a health academy that will be inaugurated in Lyon under the auspices of WHO next year. We need to all work together. We need to mobilize everyone. And I would like to say that you can all count on the Foreign Affairs Ministry to help you if you want to create, set up think tanks, foundations, bureaus, whatever architecture you want to create here. You can count on us to help you bridge the gap and come up with ways to meet your needs. So I would like to thank you for your mobilization.
What we will do is collapse them into a document that will be circulated to all of you, together with the communique out of this meeting, with my Sciences Po hat to tell you that we are relaunching our chair on debt and finance. That will be the hub in the university that would be looking at connecting with many of the initiatives that you've put on the table. I have three big takeaways. The first one is a work program. I like the words of Philippe, a work program that will capture the richness of the content, conversations and discussions that are taking place in Paris. I would suggest that for every event that we organize in our respective institutions, we label this Paris dialogue, Paris agenda, because that will give also a bit of flesh to all the things that are happening and give it a sense of, now that we have a logo, give it also a bit of a sense of content. Second, I've heard a lot about the need to mobilize the development banks, the investment banks, as the key also to imagine what a reformed international financial architecture could be. And my big third takeaway is the necessity to mobilize knowledge, data, matrix, and examine the regulatory frameworks with a very close eye to make sure we've got the basis on which to make informed proposals. So, in my view, we have the elements to start building a contribution that all of us could bring to Seville, and if all of us are capable of bringing something in common to Seville, I think we would have done at least a nice percentage of the work that would be necessary for a result. Thank you, Remy. Thank you to the Agence française de Développement, OECD, UNESCO, and all the partners around the table for this great conversation. Merci beaucoup.